Bonjour tout le monde, je suis Pamela Isfeld, la présidente de La Paz, et je vous souhaite la bienvenue. I'm here with General Manager Bertrand Mier. I always want to say Bert when I'm trying to speak French, and it sounds really funny, but Bertrand sounds funny to me in English. So there we are. We are here to talk to you about 2024 in review and what we anticipate for 2025. We're imagining this as a very informal chat. But before I get going, I would just like to remind everyone that I am chairing this meeting from the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and we acknowledge and respect them as the past, present, and future guardians and caretakers of these lands. And wherever you are, I encourage everyone to take a moment, think about the traditional custodians and people of the place that you're listening to this from and what it means for the lives that we all live today. Um, we are going to do this very informally, but Bert has been very organized and prepared a little deck. So I'm going to ask him to run through and talk from the point of view of his position as general manager and head of the PAFSO organization, what has been important in 2024. And then we will just I will add my bit in, and then we'll have a discussion. Think of this as a podcast. PAFSO experimental podcast version of the PAFSO breakfast. So Bert, over to you. And I'm just going to turn my camera off just so you don't see my weird face bobbing around as you're talking. But I'm right here and I'm listening. And if anyone is listening to this, you can put your questions in the Q&A box. And we have a couple questions that were sent in advance that we will talk about when we chat. And if there's only going to be a few of you, I suspect we can make you a panelist so you can join the discussion when we get through the deck part. So thanks, Bert, and over to you.
Thank you, Pam. Good morning, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. As Pam mentioned, my real name is Bertrand Mir, also known as Bert, and it does sound, I guess, the same whether we use French or English. Bert is Bert. But obviously, for the purpose of this podcast or this meeting, you can certainly call me Bert. There's no problem there. Only my mom calls me Bertrand. That's when she's kind of mad at me. So I'm known as Bert. Essentially, look, it's this time of year where we take a minute to kind of reflect or review what's been done, throughout the past year. We do this every year, and Pam and I kind of decided it was probably a good idea to have an informal discussion with the membership to kind of review what's been done, what are the important file that we've worked on, and what's ahead in 2025 based on what we can anticipate. I know right now it's kind of uncertain in terms of the political environment in Canada, but there's a few things that we can already kind of expect that's going to come in 2025, which I'm quite eager to kind of share with you all this morning. Now, essentially, I mean, I don't think it's a big secret that 2024 was kind of busy in terms of certain major files. And which, by the way, folks, I forgot to mention, my presentation will be in both French and English. So I'll be switching from English to French from time to time. If you want to join in, if you have any questions, feel free to ask your question in the official language of your choice. But just as I was saying, most of you are certainly aware of some of the issues we're going through during what was called a transition of the public service healthcare plan. As you all know, back in July 1st, on July 1st, 2023, the public service healthcare plan provider was changed, and this has certainly is causing a lot of undue hardship on many of our members. And unfortunately, even after being, the insurance company for more than a year, You know, there's still inabilities on the part of MSH to process claims within reasonable delays. And obviously, this is having a significant impact on our members' physical and mental health and their overall well-being. So this is kind of the main issue that we've dealt with in 2024. Um, there is also, as you all know, a new directive that came in from the employer on the on-site presence in the office. Although this does not have a tremendous effect or an impact on our members, it did raise several issues, several questions from the membership, probably more in terms of the lack of suitable workstation and suitable space. I'm going to briefly talk about that. Um, Now, there's always the residual kind of issues involving Phoenix. Phoenix continues to be to present enormous challenges and to our members. Uh, Several members have been contacted by TBS or by the pay center with overpayment situation, which in many cases has been left outstanding for several years. We keep getting those emails from members about overpayment situation, and this is a particularly kind of interesting case, which I'm going to kind of present during my presentation. And also, as you all know, there was considerable time, energy, and resources this year dedicated to the FSD cyclical review process, which obviously presented its share of issues throughout the year. I'm happy to report right now that the NGC FSD committee members has reached an agreement on a new co-development set of FSD's directive. Now, please understand that right now I'm not in the liberty to talk about the specific kind of overall amendments to the FSDs. Quite frankly, I don't even know them, so I'm not obviously I'm not in a position to be talking specifically about some of the proposed amendments or the amendments that we will likely see in 2025. But I am going to give you an overview of what we've done this year in terms of FSDs, some of the challenges that we've faced, and what the next step will be or sorry, it's early in the morning for our organization in terms of how we're going to communicate the information and what's ahead in 2025. So in order to kind of basically understand where I want to go with my presentation, it's important to kind of understand what is PAFSO's mission, and it can be interpreted and applied differently based on everyone's individual kind of perception. But essentially, PAFSO has a mission to represent the interest of our members by acting as their bargaining agent, right? In other words, a union, right? By protecting the status and standard of their profession, maintaining and promoting the effective functioning of the Foreign Service of Canada, and formulating and expressing the collective views of members on matters that affects them. Now, si on regarde la représentation des intérêts des membres, la représentation se fait de plusieurs façons. Pam, you have a question?
Oh, no, sorry, I just
Well,
wanted to chime in just for anybody watching, that the mission that you've drawn, it's in our Constitution. So
yes.
that's what's in that's spelled out in our Constitution, and that is what we draw everything from, when we do our strategic plan, that's where we start, and Lenny, my dog, agrees. Um, but yeah, just to clarify, just so people know where that's coming from. Sorry, Bert, and now I'll be quiet and let you go.
No, that's perfectly fine. I forgot to mention it. And what's also equally important is that our mission basically dictates some of the actions or the way we kind of respond to some of the issues, the ongoing issues, both with the members and with the employer, right? Donc, la représentation des intérêts des membres se manifeste de plusieurs façons. Typiquement, il faut comprendre qu'une organisation syndicale, ou un bargaining agent, comme on l'appelle en anglais, a deux facettes qui sont distinctes et particulièrement à la PAS, particulièrement à PAFSO, on a essentiellement deux composantes de l'organisation. On a une composante qui est plutôt d'ordre opérationnel, c'est-à-dire qu'on fait le travail d'un syndicat normal de représentation, qui est typique là, à tous les syndicats là, qui existent, que ce soit à la fonction publique ou que ce soit dans le secteur privé. Les fonctions et les obligations d'une organisation syndicale sont les mêmes. Donc, lorsqu'on parle de représentation des membres, on a deux formes de représentation. Il y a d'abord la représentation collective, qui est essentiellement le rôle de négocier là, la convention collective, c'est-à-dire les termes et vos termes et vos conditions d'emploi. Ça, c'est le rôle majeur principal au niveau collectif d'un syndicat. De façon générale, lorsque les gens nous disent, ça arrive à l'occasion que certains membres nous disent, mais pourquoi que je paye des cotisations syndicales? Ben, essentiellement, la raison primaire pour laquelle vous payez des cotisations syndicales, c'est pour avoir une organisation qui négocie vos termes et vos conditions de travail en votre nom. Donc, ça, c'est le rôle primaire, le rôle principal là, de la PAS. Et on rajoute à ça, puisqu'on parle de la convention collective, on rajoute également dans votre cas spécifique le co-développement des directives sur le service extérieur, des DSE, ou FSDs in English. C'est essentiellement le rôle collectif que la PAS joue dans l'intérêt de nos membres. Au niveau de PAFSO, nous avons un négociateur en chef du nom de Paul Raven, qui essentiellement, son rôle principal, c'est de négocier la convention collective et de également négocier ou, devrais-je dire, co-développer les directives sur le service extérieur. S'ajoute à ça de la représentation individuelle. Évidemment, le rôle d'un syndicat, en plus de négocier les termes et les conditions d'emploi, son rôle principal, c'est de protéger ces termes et conditions d'emploi pour les membres. Et lorsqu'il y a un différend, lorsqu'il y a un problème entre un membre et son ou sa gestionnaire, ben, le rôle du syndicat, c'est d'aider, de supporter et à l'occasion de représenter, donc de parler au nom du membre euh, euh, avec ceux qui ont des problèmes individuels avec leur gestionnaire. Et souvent, ça demande d'évaluer les circonstances et les faits d'un dossier afin de déterminer s'il existe un recours disponible. C'est important de comprendre qu'à la fonction publique fédérale, il existe environ une trentaine de recours qui sont disponibles selon les circonstances et selon les faits et la nature du dossier. De façon générale, il y a environ trois recours là, qui est utilisé de façon plus fréquemment. On parle ici du grief, qui essentiellement un grief peut porter sur n'importe quelle situation, et je vais revenir plus tard un petit peu sur quels sont les griefs qui sont arbitrables et ceux qui ne le sont pas. Je pense que c'est important de comprendre ça, d'abord et avant tout, pour mieux comprendre un petit peu là, ce qu'on a fait là, durant l'année. Euh, donc, il y a le grief, il y a également une plainte de dotation qui est quelque chose qu'on fait assez fréquemment, particulièrement lorsqu'il y a des concours là, pour des postes au sein de soit Affaires mondiales Canada ou IRCC. Donc, souvent, comme vous le savez, le régime de dotation pour le groupe FS est assez particulier. Souvent, on fait des concours génériques pour combler là, des postes avec des bassins spécifiques, des pool positions, comme on dit en anglais. Et ces genres de concours-là, souvent, ça l'amène son lot de travail lorsque les gens, au fur et à mesure que les gens sont éliminés au cours d'un processus. Il y a un processus de sélection présentement au niveau FS3 à GAC et je peux vous assurer qu'on reçoit énormément de courriels là, de la part des membres qui sont éliminés en cours de processus. Mais ça fait partie évidemment des recours qui sont disponibles. Et les autres types de recours, mais qui appartiennent plus à l'employeur, ce sont différentes plaintes là, ou processus de plainte qui existent là, au sein des organisations. On parle, par exemple, d'une plainte de harcèlement, une plainte, par exemple, des SPCA, là, de ce qu'on appelait avant le wrongdoing. En tout cas, il y a différents processus de plainte qui existent par lesquels souvent les membres, on accompagne les membres là, en cours de processus de plainte. Donc, ça, c'est le côté opérationnel du syndicat. Il y a également dans tout syndicat un côté politique ou plus politique qui est réservé essentiellement au rôle de la présidente de la PAM, et qui s'oriente plutôt vers la défense des intérêts. En anglais, on dit advocacy. Donc, si vous cherchez le terme francophone de advocacy, et je l'ai cherché, donc c'est pour ça que là maintenant je le sais, c'est la défense des intérêts. Et qu'est-ce que la défense des intérêts? Bien, en fait, ça consiste à prendre des mesures pour apporter des changements, notamment en sensibilisant un auditoire sur une problématique d'envergure. Donc, ça doit être une problématique là, qui est vécue par l'ensemble du membership. Et ce type de représentation-là est normalement utilisé souvent lorsqu'un recours formel n'est pas accessible. Et je vais le mettre, la raison pour laquelle je pense qu'il est important de comprendre cet aspect-là de l'organisation, c'est que je vais y faire référence en cours de ma présentation lorsqu'on va parler là, de la saga avec la compagnie d'assurance MSH. Donc, tout ça pour dire, c'est en fait les types de représentation qui existent à l'intérieur de l'organisation. Donc, si vous posez la question souvent, pourquoi on me représente pas ou pourquoi que on fait pas tel type de recours ou qu'on n'intervient pas plus de façon directe, c'est important de comprendre en fait comment fonctionne la représentation et ce qui peut aider souvent à expliquer pourquoi que dans certains cas, on va agir d'une façon ou utiliser un recours plutôt qu'un autre. There are some limitations to the representation, and it's important to understand these limitations so that way you kind of have a better sense of why we're doing what we're doing or why we're proposing the options that we are proposing and sometimes why we choose a specific option rather than another one, right? Now, in terms of limitation for the individual grievance, right, as I mentioned earlier, uh, you know, not you can file a grievance on anything. You can file a grievance, for example, on the color of the wall if you want, right? But it's important to understand that not all grievances can be adjudicated, right? Can go in front of a third party, namely, in our case, the Public Service Labor Relations Board. Just a few minor grievances can in fact go in front of the board, and this is under Section 209 of the legislation of the Act, the Public Service Labor Relations Act. There's only two types of grievances that can be adjudicated or can be referred to adjudication. Those being one that is specifically related to the interpretation or application of the collective agreement. So those can be adjudicated. And the only other cases are those dealing with, in most cases, for example, disciplinary action that results in that has a financial impact, i.e., meaning a suspension or higher. So, for example, just as an example, if you are disciplined, you get a letter of reprimand, you can file a grievance, but that grievance cannot be referred to adjudication. And that is important in our assessment because technically speaking, if you do file a grievance that is not adjudicable, that would mean that the final level, the internal final level of, management in your organization has the final say. So their decision at the final level is final and binding, and there's nowhere else to go. Sorry for a second. Sorry about that. Um, Now, there's also a limitation in terms of the organizational culture, specifically at GAC. I mean, I've been doing this work for 35 years, and interestingly enough, when I was initially hired at PAFSO, my first reaction when talking to members was how reluctant our members are in filing a grievance, right? And normally filing a grievance, there's nothing wrong in filing a grievance. It is a basic fundamental right for people, right? But it was kind of odd for me not knowing, specifically, GAC at all, right? How our members viewed grievance as being a bad thing. And it's only after several years of experience over at PAFSO that I realized that there is an organizational culture over at GAC that doesn't allow, or at least is not as open of people, basically expressing their fundamental right to disapprove or to challenge management decision. And I kind of found out, that there is something called a corridor of reputation, although it's a word that nobody wants to say or nobody wants to mention at GAC. It does exist, right? And for some reason, I mean, if you do file a grievance, that can taint your reputation in the organization. It could potentially put barriers on your career. So that's what I kind of understood as being a younger, eager, you know, labor relation expert. I kind of understood quite fast that filing a grievance for the FS group is certainly a big deal because a lot of people, a lot of our members view this as being a career limited move, which is something for me that is kind of difficult to comprehend. I don't understand why an organization would create such a culture because as an organization you want to know what's going on and what the issues are, right? Filing a grievance uh, is not supposed to be a bad thing. It's in fact it's a good thing from a labor relation perspective because that gives at least an indication of where the issues are and what are the problems, right? So I'm hoping in the future that GAC will recognize that this culture that they've developed over the years is certainly not conducive to have good labor relation. In fact, as far as my opinion go, right? And because this is a podcast kind of thing, I reserve the right to express my opinion, if that's okay.
Can can I just say, Bert, too, like
Yeah,
I think that that kind of a culture, when that's in place, that hinders management as well.
it does.
Because what I see is like to me, a proper grievance. I mean, and it doesn't happen often, but sometimes I think we do hear of, things that are I hate to use the word frivolous, but you know, they're very small things that should be hashed out interpersonally. Then there's like informal discussion would be a better channel, or sometimes they're people trying to get at somebody. On either side, manager trying to get at an employer, or sometimes employee, sometimes trying to get at a manager. And, it's not really like they don't really feel that they have a real grievance, but they want to annoy and, cause some anxiety, right? I mean, I think those are relatively rare, but do happen. But, proper grievances where people have tried, they've talked it out, they can't come to a solution. Those are good for management. I mean, we haven't, I don't think, had anything as a PAFSO as an employer of a unionized workforce, right? Our staff are unionized. But I'm happy as the president that there is a mechanism where you can, resolve an issue. And there's a system to sort of depersonalize it. I mean, so having a system where employees are terrified to file grievances and managers are terrified of getting them, like if you're a manager and an employee files a grievance, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a horrible human being. It just means there is an issue that is outside your mechanisms, your authorities, and there's a structure to help. So if anyone on management is listening to this, I hope, they'll give some thought to this idea, because I sometimes run across managers who say, well, I would like to deal with a problem, but you unions won't let me, we'll get a grievance. And I'm like, yeah, you might get a grievance, but so what?
Yep.
If you've really done what you're supposed to be doing, you don't need to be so scared of a grievance. Anyway.
And yep, you're absolutely right, Pam. And if I, obviously, you know, there are some issues where you do expect and you hope that people will be able to resolve their differences by mutual understanding and through communication. But sometimes, I mean, there's certain situation where people have to kind of agree to disagree. And in those cases, I think that filing a grievance is the proper approach. And if it goes to to the extent of the recourse process, we get a decision from an impartial body, and this allows us to clarify at least some of the portion of the dispute, right? That we can go on, each other's side and say, okay, from now on, this is the proper application or interpretation, right? So filing grievances is a good thing from a labor relation perspective. Um, now, obviously, if we're talking about limitation, there are also, organizational limitation, and the act in itself talks about restriction on the content of a collective agreement. What's interesting in the federal public service anyway is that the employer is also the legislator, right? So, if the employer doesn't like something, as an employer, they can turn around and legislate or create an act of parliament to kind of deal with the specific situation. And in terms of labor relation right now, the terms and conditions of employment that are established by legislation, for example, staffing, classification, and or pension, these things, I mean, are not accessible to recourse. So there is a specific recourse in terms of staffing, right, that we can use. There's a specific recourse for classification that we can use, and unfortunately, there's no really available recourse in terms of pension, right? But what's important is to understand is that in the federal public service, unlike the private sector, for example, where everything can be negotiated in the collective agreement, in the federal public service, there are limitations to what can be negotiated. And staffing, classification, and pension, for example, cannot be part of the collective bargaining process. So that means it's not subject to a standard grievance process as we would normally see in the private sector, right? And there's also limitation in terms of the advocacy work, right? One of the biggest barrier, we have to kind of realize it, that there's sometimes quite a lack of public sympathy around federal public service in general, right? And also specifically for the FS group, right? Yes, Pam. I knew you were gonna raise your hand on that one, right?
Sorry, I mean you've done such a good deck. It's getting out all the things. But I mean, I just wanted to. Are you finished with that point about public?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we did do this year was we did our first ever public opinion survey. So we did a benchmark survey to get some stats on how the public is viewed, and we're going to follow up early in the first quarter of 2025, and then toward the end of 2025, after we've done our PAFSO 60 things, to see if we've moved the needle. But I was really worried. Like, I thought that our public support would be, I was expecting like single digits, And what we actually found was that it's higher than we thought. I mean, even among the sort of general public, it was around like 40% saying that they had generally positive views of the of PAFSO and of the FS group, and then others sort of neutral. Only 20% saying like negative views, which is on a par with federal public service unions. But then when you drill down to those that actually had interacted with the FS group or with PAFSO, our numbers were higher. They were in the 75, 80. They were higher numbers. So I think, this showed me that there's something that we can build on, and also that we shouldn't be scared about the propaganda we get sometimes, right? Because sometimes you notice that whenever the public service unions start to get a little bit, I want to use the word bullshy, but maybe that's not the right word to use in this context, but start to push a little bit and start to advocate, for their members, and, talk about unfair treatment or, different things, that immediately things start in the media like, well, public servants, nobody likes you. Everyone thinks you're all privileged, you're all this, you're all that. And I don't know that it is as true as, I mean, I think there is that out there. You only have to look at the comments section of any article or anything like that. But like, you're getting to the MSH point, we have actually got quite a lot of public support on dealing with the MSH issue. People see that as something like, hey, this is not fair. You should not be treated this way. This is not working. And, from the person leading this sort of advocacy side, I mean, it has caused a lot of pain for people, so I don't want to be kind of Pollyanna-ish about like silver lining kind of thing. But honestly, as an issue to raise people's awareness of the conditions of service and the things that people go through as foreign service officers, it has been a good way of getting some of our messages out. So sorry, Bert, I don't want to hijack your presentation, but I just wanted to bring that up as that's something that we're going to be pursuing in 2025 as well.
And it's an interesting point, Pam, because unlike you, all of you, I'm not a federal public servant. I mean, I work in the private sector, right? But in general, when you talk about your average Canadian Joe public, right? They have an unfair perception of federal public service employees, and I think that's really unfair because for most of the people that you talk with, their general perception is that nobody really does any work in the federal public service, and I can tell you this is not true at all, right? Most of the members that I've talked with or that I deal with, I mean, they have a pretty overcharged day. A lot of our members are doing unpaid overtime, which is could be a completely separate, you know, topic for another webinar or podcast. But I mean, most of public servant that I know work extremely hard, and I think that's the perception of people is truly unfair. That's my honest opinion. Uh, so if we go, yes.
I'm writing down that idea for a future breakfast, for a future discussion. What is the real state of things, and what could we do about
Well,
it? You know?
we can
Sorry.
we can certainly find some of the issues, a lot of issues going on right now that we can you know provide information on for sure, right? Now, if we go to the nitty gritty thing of my presentation, obviously, what were the big case file or big issues that we worked on in 2024? Well, I mean, you all know, there is certainly some major issues in terms of the continuing saga of the health insurance abroad, and just to kind of go back a little bit, right, of what what we kind of dealt with in the past, right? Almost immediately following the transition, our members and their families at at home and abroad began experiencing significant issues related to the processing of their claims. Now, PAVSO is, in fact, as of this day, still receiving several emails per day from members who are voluntarily sharing their particular experience in dealing with MSH International. And there are some horror stories out there. Trust me, folks. It's not even funny. Unfortunately, um, PAFSO does have a limited kind of scope of intervention on an individual basis, at least, right? When it comes to navigating through the public service healthcare plan, right? However, in the past year, both the PAFSO advocacy folks, right, in the organization and the labor relation team have been kind of working together to explore different options to address some of the issues that our members are experiencing. Now, it's important to understand just some basic kind of general facts here that the public service healthcare plan provides health coverage for 1.7 million federal public sector employees, retirees, members of the Canadian Armed Forces, and their dependents. So we're talking about a lot of people here, right? The plan coverage includes all of PAFSO's membership, right? Um, so that is the public service healthcare plan, not MSH, but the healthcare plan, right? Now, as I was saying previously in my presentation, there is limitation when a particular issue is kind of addressed by legislation, right? Now, the plan is established under Section 7.1, Paragraph 1 of the Financial Administration Act, which empowers the Treasury Board to establish or modify any group insurance or other benefits program for employees in the federal public administration and any other person. So essentially, what the FAA, Financial Administration Act, says is that the employer is responsible for providing our employees, our members, the insurance that they duly deserve. Essentially, that's what it says. However, the problem is because this is an act or legislated, right? It is kind of a barrier for us in terms of offering representation to people, right? Because the legislation itself talks about a recourse process that does exist, and I'll come back to this if there's any question on it, but it does provide a certain recourse process, right? But it's outside, the collective agreement, and it's outside the scope of, our intervener or intervention status, right? Now, the plan is administered by a contractor under an administrative service contract, which is in this case Canada Life, right? The plan provides for both supplementary and comprehensive coverage for plan members. Supplementary coverage is provided to plan members and their eligible dependent who lives in Canada, right? And are covered by a provincial or territorial health insurance plan. The comprehensive coverage is available to plan members who live and work outside of Canada and to their eligible dependents, right? Plan members working outside of Canada and their dependents are reliant on the plan for all aspects of healthcare coverage. That's kind of important for us, mainly for people working abroad, because you rely on the plan for coverage in all aspects of the insurance, right? Donc, comme vous le savez, et là, je vais y aller de façon très brève parce que c'est comme un petit peu l'historique. Le 1er juillet 2023, l'administration du régime de santé est transférée de la Sun Life et l'Alliance pour ceux qui étaient à l'étranger à Canada Vie et MSH International, respectivement. MSH pour les gens qui travaillent à partir de d'étrangers. Immédiatement après la transition, nous avons commencé à recevoir là, des courriels et des communications de la part des membres nous rapportant là, plusieurs problèmes avec le traitement de leurs réclamations, euh, particulièrement ceux qui avaient été soumises à l'Alliance. Donc, les réclamations qui avaient été soumises à l'Alliance lors de la période de transition sont essentiellement tombées là, dans le néant avec MSH International. Donc, à partir de ce moment-là, nous, à La Paz, Pam et moi en particulier, on a eu des rencontres de consultation avec la haute gestion d'Affaires mondiales Canada pour les informer des problèmes. Euh, le ministère, comme vous le savez, a décidé de mettre en place la possibilité d'offrir des avances de fonds sous la DSE là, 42 pour au moins tenter de soutenir financièrement les employés qui étaient en attente là, d'une acceptation de leur réclamation. Cette mesure-là était au préalable là, supposée être temporaire jusqu'au 28 février 2024. Ça a été prolongé là, pour les raisons qu'on connaît aujourd'hui. Euh, le 2 avril 2024, nous avons fait une demande, la PAS a fait une demande auprès de nos avocats, étant donné que la situation ne s'améliorait pas. Et là, on parle là, après aussi l'incident en cybersécurité là, que MSH a connu. Là. On a consulté nos avocats pour obtenir une opinion légale sur les différentes options qui étaient disponibles là, pour essayer du moins de faire avancer le dossier. Et parmi les options qui ont été proposées par nos avocats, il y en avait quatre en fait. Le premier, c'était de déposer un grief de principe contre le Conseil du Trésor. Un grief de principe en anglais, c'est collective
Policy grievance?
policy grievance. Thank you, Pam. Oh boy, sorry. Euh, il y avait aussi la possibilité de faire une demande d'ordonnance d'un tribunal supérieur, ce que je vais reprendre tantôt. Il y avait la possibilité aussi de déposer une plainte à la Commission canadienne des droits de la personne contre le Conseil du Trésor. Et il y avait aussi la possibilité de déposer un recours civil contre le Conseil du Trésor. Euh, donc, voici ce que nous avons fait là, au cours de l'année. Donc, le 10, sorry. On April 10, 2024, PAFSO proceeded with filing a policy grievance against Treasury Board. So that was one of the options, the first option that we kind of took on, amongst the options that were proposed by our legal counsel. The grievance per se, and I'm not going to tell you what the details of the grievance is, but essentially what we are seeking is general damage for all employees for stress and aggravated pain and suffering. We are also seeking damages for those who have experienced financial loss, damage under the Canadian Human Rights Act for adverse impact based on a prohibited ground, and we have also included other possible remedies based on individual circumstances. So this is essentially what we're seeking with the grievance. Now, we are still waiting for a hearing, but we've heard last week that a decision was rendered internally on a grievance that was filed by the PSAC, the Alliance, and not as a big surprise, the grievance was denied. So right now we are also communicating. We have our internal contact with the Alliance to see what the game plan is, and I suspect that the Alliance will move forward and will refer the case to the board. Now, without any surprise, I guess Treasury Board decided to go with the PSAC grievance first. We will likely be next. So we do anticipate, being called for a hearing in early 2025 on our policy grievance, and we'll likely have the same outcome as the PSAC did, and we will likely also need to kind of take steps in order to refer the policy grievance to the board. So this is what we expect to do in 2025 in terms of the policy grievance. Now, on June 25th, so a few months afterwards, given in light of the fact that the employer was not taking any action after filing the policy grievance, we've decided to file a human rights complaint. So we did file a human rights complaint, and we are seeking again damages for pain and suffering, damages for those who have experienced final loss. So that was done back in June. Again, not having any response from TBS after filing our human rights complaint, we've decided on October 29, 2025, to file a writ of mandamus application seeking the federal court to compel the government of Canada to meet its obligation, which is to provide a functional public service healthcare plan for our members serving Canada abroad. Um, Along with our application submission, now we have filed more than 60 documents into evidence in which I've last week I've affirmed to, right? uh, Showing the major problems that our members are experiencing with the insurance carrier. Now, the type of problems that we're talking about: interruption of benefit and long delays of claim processing. Arbitrary and erroneous denials of claims, failure to pay benefits accurately, lack of access to accurate support, coverage gaps. I mean, you name it, we've seen it all. And despite our best effort, in filing these formal actions against Treasury Board, we have still yet received any kind of knowledge or acknowledgement of any responsibility on their part in terms of the failure of Canada Life and MSH. So we are going to expect that we are going to go in front of federal court in 2025. Hopefully, if we are successful, the tribunal, federal court, will issue an order to Treasury Board to get things rolling and offer our members an insurance plan that they do deserve. Right now, quickly in terms of the FSD cyclical review process, I'm not going to go because I'm cognizant that we're pressed by time here. And here I was thinking that there's no way I can talk for an hour. But anyway, look, you give me a subject, I guess I can talk for hours. But just briefly to kind of let you know, I'm not going to provide all the details. But we started this process, the FSD cyclical review process, back in 2022. In fact, right now, in the course of 2023, we did some major consultation with our members to kind of identify some of the priorities. What's important to know, what we've done in 2024 in terms of the cyclical review process, um, we've submitted, I mean, all in all, there were 312 proposals that were discussed at the table, right? And I'm pleased to kind of report that 147 of those 312 proposals led to an agreement, which is a substantial amount of proposal, honestly, right? And, sometimes we do like to criticize the employer. That's what unions do normally, right? But in this case, I do think, honestly, that the employer kind of, also proposed or made some proposals to the benefit of our members. So this was when you look at what's going on right now in the NGC committees, the FSD committee was really a functional committee, and the working group committee did a lot of work. They have basically met for more than 47 times throughout the year to discuss some of the proposals. Now, obviously, it's always like that when you negotiate things, right? There probably are some proposals that we would have liked to gain, but we weren't able to. But there's certainly going to be a lot of proposal, which I think is going to be beneficial for our members, right? I don't know in details what all of these 147 amendments are, to be quite honest, but I've heard that there's going to be more flexibility in terms of how money is going to or allowance is going to be awarded or given out. So that's certainly going to be something to look forward to, right? Now, although there's an agreement on the proposed amendments, there's still steps that needs to be followed in order for this to be officially implemented, right? So the next step, yes, Pam.
Oh, sorry, no, finish your point. I just wanted to talk about the cooperation that we've been getting with GAC when you're
Yep.
done.
Okay. So the next step is that the final report of the working committee will be submitted to the NGC Executive Committee for their approval. Uh, I was, I believe this is done this week, in fact. So if everything goes well, the NGC Executive Committee will likely approve the changes this week. On TBS's side, on the employer side, they're also preparing a report for the president of Treasury Board that we'll need to sign off on, right? Now, only when those two authority, being the executive committee, the NGC executive committee, and the president of TBS, only after they sign will this become official, right? So at this point, we're still dealing with proposals, right? But rest assured, this is the only thing I'm going to say here. For 2025, if this is signed off on, if this becomes official, we will provide all the information to our members that they need in terms of what's important in the changes, right? We will make informal information. We will provide information session to our members, and we will develop a communication strategy to make sure that the information is duly communicated with people, right? So off you go, Pam. You can talk about what the efforts we've done with the employer also or with management.
Thanks. I mean, I just wanted to just give a little bit of a shout out to you and the team, and also, frankly, to our counterparts on the GAC and the Treasury Board side. More, I mean, on the GAC side, they're the ones who are dealing with this directly, but it has been testimony to establishing good relationships, I think, as an association, as a bargaining agent. Bert and his team, especially Paul Raven and Monique Punai, who are our two labor relations advisors who deal with this, they have established very good, like largely cooperative relationships with their counterparts, and Bert and I as well. And we have found really that, especially on the GAC side, right up to the deputy minister level, like there has been a real desire, Treasury Board as well, to look at, how can we make these things simpler and easier and more effective for everybody concerned? Because, some of the problems that we're seeing, like, different multiple interpretations of the same wording of a directive, depending on which advisor you get. And, from year to year, people having to go back and, resubmit all kinds of things. We have actually managed to work with them. We just had a meeting not too long ago where, we talked about things that are not in the FSDs and like not won't be dealt with in the cyclical review, but some of the ways that administratively things are handled, and we were able to look and agree on, okay, are there some ways that this could be simplified for now without even any changes, and that openness, that kind of willingness to discuss things takes us a long way. It solves a lot of problems. And it goes to show that we don't need to go to a formal grievance. We don't need to have an adversarial thing all the time. If we have those good relationships, I mean, we're not afraid to fight. We're not afraid to file grievances. We're not afraid to do things when necessary. But it's not always necessary, right? I'm not afraid to fight at all, but I don't seek conflict or fighting when there is another way to do it. And like the FSDs are an excellent, excellent example of where we have found that that our cooperation and good relationships have really paid off. And that is testimony to our staff team, to the approach of executive committee, to what you guys have endorsed as members. We are seeing concrete results on this. I wish we had the same concrete results on something like MSH. Although on MSH, GAC has been very flexible, and really we're on the same side with GAC in trying to get this contract dealt with, trying to get this fixed. It's the problem is at the level of Treasury Board, PSPC, and the company to say, listen, like you can't just fold your hands and say, oh well, this is a private company and they're going to work it out. We're saying no. You are still responsible for providing the benefit that you are committed to providing, whether a company screws up or not. So I just wanted to make that shout out and shout out to you guys. And this is why sometimes, I mean, every so often we get comments from members saying, "You're not fighting enough. Why aren't you louder? Why aren't you going out, more quickly, like some of the big unions, like the Alliance, like some of these things." It's like, well, they have a different footprint, a different culture. They're dealing across multiple departments, where we have two departments really, where our approach of building relationships and using persuasion, advocacy mixed in with our hard labor relations, it works better in some cases. It doesn't always work, which is why we have the different, arrows in our quiver, right? But it, going head to head does not always yield the results that we want. So I'm very glad to be working with a team that recognizes that and is able to do both things. So sorry, Bert, I don't want to hijack you. Go
No,
buzz.
no, and I think, look, I mean, as for the rest of my presentation, I don't think it's as important, right? Because these are more of, lesser, to some extent, a less serious, kind of less serious issues that we've dealt with. But I do think, and I'm kind of looking at the clock here, so I do understand that, you
We
know,
said till 10:30. Like we
okay.
gave a buffer of to allow for some questions. So maybe do you want to just whip through your last few slides and
Yeah, I'm
see if
gonna
we
I'm gonna just whip it, very, very kind of, briefly. We've, one of the major issues that we've dealt with in 2024 was some of the recovery of overpayment situation, particularly, cases that was outside the statutory barred limitation of 6 years. Now, PAFSO was, in fact, the first union, the first bargaining agent that actually filed formal grievance against, the employer's attempt to proceed with what we considered at the time to be unlawful kind of recovery process. Now, oddly enough, I mean, in 2024, we were successful in the sense that we've kind of settled three grievance that was scheduled before the board. Now, what's interesting is that right now there's other grievances that has been filed, for which we're kind of waiting for a hearing to be scheduled. Despite the fact that the employer is recognizing that there's a statute bar limitation here, right? Treasury Board is still refusing to resolve at this point all outstanding grievances. So what they're essentially doing is that they're waiting for each individual case to be scheduled at the board before they reach out to us and work on a settlement, right? And what's even more surprising, till this day, in fact, we've got a couple additional one yesterday. The pay center is still going ahead with trying to recover statute barred overpayment. So that is quite interesting. So just as we thought that this issues, this issue we could put behind us, it's not the case. Unfortunately, Pay Center is still proceeding with the recovery, although it is statute bar. So yes, Pam.
Oh, sorry. No, I just wanted to
No, no.
say apparently on FSDs as well, they're sending people letters saying, "Oh, by the way, we've assessed that you owe this money. If you would like
Yeah,
to volunteer to repay." And apparently some people have sent them money, like some considerable amounts. Hey, if people want to hand over money to the government, then that's, I guess, up to them if they feel guilty that maybe they recognize they feel like they should have realized that they got this money. But honestly, a lot of this it's on the employer to get it together.
yep,
And I kind of feel like if they don't get it together to collect, like maybe, that sends a powerful message that don't do that again next time.
yep,
That it's not just on employees that there will be consequences for not being competent, frankly.
yep.
Anyway,
Abs-
sorry, keep
No,
going.
no, absolutely. And our recommendation is always if you do get a recovery letter that is, beyond a 6 year limitation period, well, you should immediately tell the employer that you're not going to reimburse them, right? And if the employer wants to insist, well, we'll take the case on. We've been successful on three of them so far. So I suspect that the other ones we will also be successful, right? So it's clear, black and white, that the employer has 6 years in order to kind of recover any overpayments. And the fact that it takes more than 6 years to kind of recognize that there's been an overpayment situation, for me that's unexplicable. But that's my position, right? And just briefly on some of other grievances, it's been a 2024 has been a particular busy period for PAFSO anyway, in terms of the number of cases that was actually brought forward at the board. There was actually three grievances that were presented at the board, which is something that some people may think that's not a whole lot, but for a smaller organization like us, I mean, getting three cases in a year presented at the board is something unusual. Um, and it shows it shows that we do go forward on some of the cases, right? Now, one of the cases involves, discrimination. In fact, two of the three cases involve discrimination. The first case, we started presenting the case at the board, and the employer approached us and decided to give it a shot for a settlement. So the case was actually settled while it was presented at the board. So that case is closed. The second one, we've filed our final written submission last week. So we do expect that we'll be getting a decision from the board in 2025 on that one. And the third one involves the interpretation of an FSD provision under FSD 50. And again, this one we're kind of closing off on our final written submission this week. So again, that case will also get a decision in 2025. Now, for next year, there's already two cases that are scheduled for a hearing. One is in January, the other one is in February. So already we know that there's two cases that is gearing up to be presented at the board. Uh, anyway, we'll see where that goes. We suspect that these cases will probably be argued in 2025 and will likely get a decision also from the board in 2025. So all in all, we'll probably get four decisions from the board on four separate grievances in 2025. So things are rolling up, and things are certainly moving ahead here. So
Excellent.
that is it, Pam. That is my presentation. Hopefully, people are not too asleep right now by now.
But no, that was great. And I mean, I piggybacked most of my points on yours. I mean, from my point of view, the things that were big, from the advocacy like level of the president were the strategic plan, which was adopted by the membership in October that gives us guidance for the next 3 years. It's online, people can find it. Um, Basically, we're focusing on next year is PAFSO's 60th anniversary. And so, we want to celebrate our history as an association and of the history of the FS group. We're going to have a big gala at the beginning of June at the National Gallery where we will present an award for Foreign Service Officer of the Year. It'll be one award. We're not going to do this anymore, enough awards that everyone in the stream can get because in each stream can get one because we found frankly that it was too much. Some streams were not, there were not nominations were not coming in. And, frankly, that was becoming divisive. People would be annoyed that, there was no representative of their stream. And we would say, well, we begged for nominations and nobody did one. And, sometimes the attitude was, well, you didn't beg enough. And I'm like, listen, it's, you know, one Foreign Service Officer of the Year. There will be other opportunities to recognize people. We want to focus a little bit more on, we're going to use this as an opportunity to really get our message out, who the Foreign Service is, what it does, who our people are, who our families are. I was very happy to see the formation of the Canadian Diplomatic Family Network, which, we gave some support and a little nudging to sort of get going. They, I think, will be an important voice for, family members, spouses, children of our members and others. It's open to the broad foreign service community. And that will help us as PAFSO advocate where we can on those issues because we will have a clear, there's an organization now with a mandate that will be gathering, in an organized way, the views of those folks because we don't represent them directly. Many of them are in other unions. Some of them are not, not employed in the public sector at all. So that's been a little bit of a sticking point, how exactly we, what our mandate is to advocate on behalf of those folks. And that's coming up, that this is important. What else? I'm trying to think. So there will be my term, this 3-year term that you first elected me to is coming to an end in 2025. So there will be elections for a second round of president in 2025. Probably around February, the nominations will need to open. I plan to stand again. I hope that people will be willing to have me back. But if anyone is listening to this and you really, you are really interested in standing, I hope that you will. I hope come talk to me because, I know with timing of when positions come due with, the new move to 3-year assignments and so on, there may be some people who might be thinking, oh, I'd be interested, but I'm in a post, I'm not due to come back for 2 more years. Come talk to me and we can discuss maybe there might be a mechanism to do that because PAFSO 1965 was a great year for both PAFSO and I were born that year. And so, I'm starting to look at my next chapter. I still feel like there is work that I would like to keep doing for you that, I have some things I would still like to get in place for whoever comes after me so that, they can really step into a job that is, doesn't have some of the still governance and structural things to work on where, we've now established a good system of strategic planning cycle. We've established a good system of management for what used to be called the executive director / general manager, staff. A lot of things are in place. And I would like to finish up those those last bits and sort of establish PAFSO a bit more in the public eye, the media as that spokesperson. And then, I feel like, okay, I will be able to hand over proper presidency, proper president function to the next generation. And there's some flexibility in that for sure. So whoever's listening to this, please think about it. It's a great gig. It is really an opportunity to do, some work that isn't natural to the FS skill set, I think. But, that, is a little bit different experience, and you get to work at things from a different angle at a little bit different level. You get to work with the, presidents of the big bargaining units at the National Joint Council with Treasury Board. There's a lot of interesting stuff to do. Bert, can you think of anything else? Is there anything else we should mention to wrap up 2024? Maybe we could discuss, I think we got a few questions ahead of time, but I think you covered them mostly in your presentation. I encourage people to go have a good look at the website. There's an FAQ section, there's an Are You New to PAFSO section that goes into things in a lot more detail. But one question we have heard about, and given, that we may be in an election with a government, with a party that has pretty much made clear, like, we need to do some cost cutting, and we've already started some cost cutting and not workforce adjustment, but um, budgetary restrictions. People are wondering, if do we anticipate being in workforce adjustment next year? And if so, how is that likely to affect the FS group? Do you want to maybe run through what would happen with that? I know you were through it with other unions with your other employers in the past.
Yes, and I was, I was not unfortunate enough to kind of experience the last cut in the federal public service. It's difficult to kind of predict whether or not there is going to be a WFA situation. But if we look at from past experience here, Pam, if we're looking at what right now what is going on in terms of not stopping the clock on term employment, for example, not renewing any contract work for casual or student employees. When you look at that, and already Treasury Board has mentioned that they're kind of looking at attrition and probably not staffing any vacant position that will be left um, unencumbered. If we look at that, I think it's safe to say that we are probably looking at a potential WFA situation in 2025. Now, again, just to add, and I don't want to do any politics here, but if we add the fact that we will likely get a new government in 2025, we all know which government will that be, and based on again previous experience, having a conservative government is probably more prone or more, you know, more sustainable that there is going to be WFA going on. Now, what's interesting is when you read the Workforce Adjustment Directive, the employer does have an obligation to put in place a consultative body in the organization before they start talking about any WFA action, right? So we will know quite early if GAC and or IRCC is planning on cutting position even before the actual process starts, right? So that is kind of reassuring that there is a consultation mechanism under the WFA to consult with the unions before they go ahead with any cuts, right? But it is kind of out there, and I wouldn't be surprised. Yes, Pam.
Thanks. Just a question. So even if, I mean, with PAFSA, with us being in pools, right?
Yeah.
In the past, that has kind of given us a bit of a buffer.
Yes.
Because, we don't have term members, and we have, there's generally more positions than there are people. Now, I know what happened in 2012 was, some people were put in positions that they did not necessarily like, because of the position, the assignment that they were in, that those positions were deleted and so on. And I know that, for some people who have maybe, been on leave or, have been unassigned or on special projects or things like that, some of those may be given some options that, okay, you're going to have to pick a job and pick one of these jobs that might not be great, So there are some things that might happen, but I know it does kind of give us a bit of a buffer. But
It
if
does.
can I just say my question, sorry, my long question, if this happened, and even if we were not anticipating, like, would we still be part of this committee, even if we're talking about position cuts rather than body cuts for the FS
Y-
group in most cases?
yes, we would. I mean,
Okay.
all bargaining agents in the department needs to be part of that consultation body,
Okay.
irrespective of whether or not positions will actually be cut, right? Now, you are certainly correct in kind of saying that, in a sense, the way the staffing regime worked for the FS group kind of give out some protections in terms of actually cutting out jobs of people losing their employment, right? I don't anticipate, to be quite honest, that any FS, and don't quote me on this, but this is my kind of prediction here. I don't suspect that no one will kind of lose their employment. No FSs will lose their employment out of any workforce adjustment situation simply because the way the staffing regime works for FS, you know, they don't have a substantive position to be cut, right? So, and certainly the employer cannot cut a pool managed position, right? Because that would involve a whole lot of people, right?
Yeah.
So if the fact that no one has a substantive position, it's kind of difficult for the employer to cut that position, right? So, in other words, the way, although it's kind of bizarre because although the staffing regime for an FS group doesn't guarantee job security, in the same sense, it kind of guarantees that you will not lose your employment, right? So,
It,
the rotational kind of aspect of positions kind of provides an added protection when it comes to WFA. That's
yeah.
safe to
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I guess they would have to do like a reverse order of merit,
Yes.
you know,
No.
which would be, and I think we would really fight that because that I can imagine. I heard that they did that like maybe 25 years ago. I think there might have
Yep.
been something when I very first joined. And I remember people talking about the pain of that,
That.
because how do you evaluate people and how do you go to somebody and say, okay, we have 1,200, 1,400 positions or whatever, and we've decided that you are number 1450.
Yep.
So, you are the one who loses your position. I think we would be saying, listen, like, can you offer, can people volunteer to retire? Can we, like, I remember doing a staffing course once at the public, what was called the Canada School now, and the guy was a retired TBS executive, and he said, listen, he said, do anything in an organization, anything to avoid reverse order of merit.
Oh, it's not a fun process, and anybody who's gone through a Serlo process, right, will tell you first and foremost, competing to keep your job. I mean, it's one thing if you ask for a competition to be promoted to another job, but asking people to compete to keep their job against one another, right? That is certainly not a good process to follow. And for sure, we will be looking at those really closely. And if rest assured that if any members are impacted by WFA, we will certainly take their case on and look at their situation extremely carefully, right? So, I mean, although I'm not really fond of seniority when it comes to cuts, right? And I can understand why in the federal public service seniority is not the way to kind of cut position. The alternative, which is the reverse order of merit competition process, is not ideal either, right? And
No,
no, certainly not
no.
an ideal situation. So if the government is going in that direction, rest assured that 2025 will certainly be an interesting year, right? And yeah,
Well, and let's hope not,
let's hope not.
I think we don't want to panic, but yeah, we're
No, but my
for anyone
final
watching this, we're ready if
we
we need to be, but There's
Yes.
no there's no need to be too worried. Okay,
No.
let's say
What I've
something positive.
final word on this issue, Pam. What I've told the LRA team, the PASO LRA team, is look, expect the best, but prepare for the worst, right? So
Exactly, exactly.
this is
That's what
how
we
we're
have to
dealing
do.
with it. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
let's say something, think of something positive because we want to end on a positive note. What can we say? 2025, super exciting year.
Yes.
Uh, La Paz, l'anniversaire 60 de La Paz
Yes.
et beaucoup de bons événements et les choses très fun pour 2025, pour 2025.
J'espère que les membres vont venir en grand nombre à notre 60e anniversaire de la cérémonie. On va avoir on a acheté des petits présents pour tout le monde. Ça va être la fête et j'espère que les gens vont vraiment se joindre à nous et profiter du moment qu'on va avoir ensemble et célébrer en fait la profession
Merci
essentiellement.
beaucoup. Thanks, Bert. I'm just going to turn
Merci.
off the recording.